esoteric perspective, New World Order, conspiratorial, or whether you want to zoom out a little bit and see this as consciousness and a spiritual journey. All these things are valid, credible avenues of inquiry. They all show us things that are significant. They're all important to contemplate it. And it's no use just focusing on just one, because you only see one facet of this object. So the realization, this truth, brings us back onto the focus of us, ourselves, as individuals, not even as a group, but as you, the listener, as you, the thinker, as the experiencer. And what does this mean, this perception, this realization in your day-to-day life? So it brings it back into very much your own consciousness. And that means that if the source of your incoming vectors, shall we say, where you get your news from, is just the TV, BBC and CNN and so on, Fox or whatever, and the radio and the newspapers and Google News and so on, is that really giving you a valid picture of what's occurring in the 21st century on Earth? And I think we all know that it isn't really a valid picture. It's one single filter through which we see things, one single translation of what's going on in the world. So the first thing to deal with, to grasp this realization, is in this sort of impulse of understanding what's happening in your community, what's happening in science, in music, in art, technology, spirituality. What are people doing who have long since anticipated or experienced this realization and who have already gone through it? What are those people doing? So the realization really boils down to a simple truth, which is the world really isn't the way we were told it was. And now that is very, very self-evident, and there's no real escape from that. And the problem looks very doom-laden when we imagine that the only way to solve that problem is by shuffling around the same pieces on the game board that represent that problem. And of course, that isn't really a viable way forward. And various people have worded this in different ways, that you can't kind of solve the problem with the same consciousness or the same mindset that created the problem. So always with these things, it brings us back to what are we going to do in our own lives, because that's where the whole thing for me emanates from. And many spiritual philosophical systems and traditions and sects and so on have grappled with these questions for aeons, for many, many millennia. It's nothing new, this. It's always been like this. And it's not suddenly got a lot worse. It's just suddenly got a lot clearer. So the problem now is a big high definition issue right in front of your eyes. It's not a rumour. It's not a notion. And it's not a vague or faint possibility. It's something that is right there. We can see it. It doesn't function. The system is broken. And so even within the main monotheistic religions, the Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, whatever, for me, the root of all these systems is a single spiritual discipline, which is aimed at the same things, which is liberation, clarity, cooperation, harmony, knowingness, and fundamentally understanding that the idea that when we rewire our inner landscape, that is the only thing that shifts the outer landscape. And I think if that is consigned to, well, that's all very nice, that's a bit of New Age philosophy or a bit of old stuff wrapped up in some, new paper or whatever, we can't do that anymore, because that is where the solution lies. So that dissonance that I speak of, that arises from the fact that we constantly seek to disavow this truth, this discipline of the inner landscape of what we are and what we're doing here. And the longer we disavow that, the worse things get on the outside. So in a very, very literal sense, and I must admit even myself over the last decade or whatever, it's increasingly got this way for me, the outside is a very literal translation of what's going on the inside. not only it cause and effect kind of way of, well, we think these things and then we do these things, but that actual mental landscape inside, if that is toxic, then the outside is instantly always also toxic. And so we have to go to that inner space to correct this problem. And that is where this solution and this issue lies for me. And so I remain extremely optimistic, because our facility for transforming that inner landscape in a very real, hands-on, simple way, and all the different techniques and tools and tactics and strategies and so on, are very well documented, very well laid out. And despite various attempts to subvert those, the accessibility of that information and hide it and conceal it, hasn't worked. It's all still there. It's all over the place, and it can be gotten to. But we're so accustomed to living a life which is very self-centered in the commonly understood sense, and very clinging to our own existence, that it seems an equation that doesn't add up for a lot of people. Like, what's in it for me if I go within? What does that mean? What you're talking about? How does that change the outside? So we do find ourselves at a stage where we've all been in this university, this college, whatever, for a long, long time, and not many people are anywhere near graduating. They're all still pissing around in the first few classes, in the first couple of years, and they don't understand that the progress, the growth, the ascendance through that school is what it's all about. And so that, in my view, also accounts at a higher level for why there's 7 billion people here, because nobody's really graduating. Everybody keeps arriving, but few people feel equipped. And I stress feel equipped, not that they're not equipped. They don't feel equipped to deal with this inner reality. And the sense that the two things are separate, the inside and the outside, is the fundamental problem. So unless you understand the bridge between the two, then it is an insurmountable issue, and you might as well just vaporize the whole place, Vogon style, and just start again. But that is just a reboot. It doesn't actually correct the fundamental issue, and it will just recur again in a few million or billion years or whatever. So we might as well deal with it now. We might as well grasp the nettle now.
Fascination with freedom in your hands. Now you call me, you call me, you call me, you call me. This introduction to the peacefulness of your